Chapter 41. Pablo stopped and dismounted in the dark. Hello, testing. Hello, hello, hello. Pablo stopped and dismounted in the dark. Robert Jordan heard the creaking and the heavy breathing as they all dismounted and the clinking of the bridle as a horse tossed his head. He smelled the horses and the unwashed and sour, slept-in clothing smell of the new men, and the wood-smoky, sleep-stale smell of the others who had been in the cave. Pablo was standing close to him, and he smelled the brassy, dead wine smell that came from him like the taste of a copper coin in your mouth. He lit a cigarette, cupping his hand to hide the light, pulled deep on it, and heard Pablo say very softly, "Get the grenade sack, Pilar, while we hobble these." "Augustine," Robert Jordan said in a whisper. Well, that's right, they're getting ready to finally attack this bridge. "Augustine," Robert Jordan said in a whisper, "you and Anselmo come now with me to the bridge. Have you a sack of pans for the machina?" "Yes," Augustine said. "Why not?" Robert Jordan went over to where Pilar was unpacking one of the horses with the help of Primitivo. "Listen, woman," he said softly. "What now?" she whispered huskily, swinging a cinch hook clear from under the horse's belly. "Thou understandest that there is to be no attack on the post until thou hearest the falling of the bombs." "How many times dost thou have to tell me?" Pilar said. "You are getting like an old woman, Ingles." "Only to check," Robert Jordan said. "And after the destruction of the post, you fall back onto the bridge and cover the road from above." "Only to check," Robert Jordan said, "and after the destruction of the post, you fall back onto the bridge and cover the road from above and my left flank." "The first time thou outlined it, I understood it as well as I will ever understand it," Pilar whispered to him. "Get thee about thy business. That no one should make a move, nor fire a shot, nor throw a bomb until the noise of the bombardment comes," Robert Jordan said softly. "Do not molest me more," Pilar whispered angrily. "I have understood this since we were at Sordo's." Robert Jordan went to where Pilar was tying the horses. "I have only hobbled those which are liable to panic," Pablo said. "These are tied, so a pull of the rope will release them, see?" "Good. I will tell the girl and the gypsy how to handle them," Pablo said. His new men were standing in a group by themselves, leaning on their carbines. "Dost understand all?" Robert Jordan asked. "Why not?" Pablo said. "Destroy the post, cut the wire, fall back on the bridge, cover the bridge until thou blowest." And nothing to start until the commencement of the bombardment. Thus it is. Well then, much luck. Pablo grunted. Then he said, Thou wilt cover us well with the machina, and with thy small machina, when we come back. Eh, Ingles? De la Primera, Robert Jordan said, off the top of the basket. De la Primera. Then Pablo said, Nothing more, but in that moment thou must be very careful, Ingles. It will not be simple to do that unless thou art very careful. I will handle the machina myself, Robert Jordan said to him. Hast thou much experience? For I am of no mind to be shot by Augustine with his belly full of good intentions. I have much experience, truly, and if Augustine uses either machina, I will see that he keeps it way above thee. Above, and above. Then nothing more, Pablo said. Then he said, softly and confidently, There is still a lack of horses. Son of a bitch, Robert Jordan thought, or does he think I did not understand him the first time? I go on foot, he said. The horses are thy affair. Nay, there will be a horse for thee, Ingles, Pablo said softly. There will be horses for all of us. That is thy problem, Robert Jordan said. Thou dost not have to count me. Hast enough rounds for thy new machina? Yes, Pablo said. All that the cavalrymen carried. I have fired only 4 to try it. I tried it yesterday in the high hills. We go now, Robert Jordan said. We must be there early and well hidden. We all go now, Pablo said. Suerte, Ingles. I wonder what the bastard is planning now, Robert Jordan said. But I am pretty sure I know. Well, that is his, not mine. Thank God I do not know these new men. He put his hand out and said, Suerte, Pablo. And their 2 hands gripped in the dark. Robert Jordan, when he put his hand out, expected that it would be like grasping something reptilian or touching a leper. He did not know what Pablo's hand would feel like, but in the dark, Pablo's hand gripped his hard and pressed it frankly, and he returned the grip. Pablo had a good hand in the dark, and feeling it gave Robert Jordan the strangest feeling he had felt that morning. We must be allies now, he thought. There was always much handshaking with allies, not to mention decorations and kissing on both cheeks, he thought. I'm glad we do not have to do that. I suppose all allies are like this. They always hate each other. Au fond. But this Pablo is a strange man. Suerte, Pablo, he said, and gripped the strange, firm, purposeful hand hard. I will cover thee well, do not worry. I am sorry for having taken thy material, Pablo said. It was an equivocation. But thou hast brought what we needed. I do not hold this of the bridge against thee, Ingles, Pablo said. I see a successful termination for it. What are you 2 doing? Becoming maricones? Pilar said, suddenly beside them in the dark. That is all thou hast lacked, she said to Pablo. Get along, Ingles, and cut thy goodbyes short before this one steals the rest of thy explosive. Thou dost not understand me, woman, Pablo said. The Ingles and I understand one another. Nobody understands thee. Neither God nor thy mother, Pilar said, nor I either. Get along, Ingles. Make thy goodbyes with thy cropped head and go. Me cajo en tu padre. But I begin to think thou art afraid to see the bull comes out. Thy mother, Robert Jordan said. Thou never hadst one, Pilar whispered cheerfully. Now go, because I have a great desire to start this and get it over with. Go with thy people, she said to Pablo. Who knows how long their stern resolution is good for? Thou hast a couple that I would not trade thee for. Take them and go. Robert Jordan slung his pack on his back and walked over to the horses to find Maria. Goodbye, Guapa, he said. I will see thee soon. He had an unreal feeling about all of this now, as though he had said it all before, or as though it were a train that were going, especially as though it were a train, and he was standing on the platform on a railway station. Goodbye, Roberto, she said. Take much care. Of course, he said. He bent his head to kiss her, and his pack rolled forward against the back of his head, so that his forehead bumped hers hard. As this happened, he knew this had happened before, too. Don't cry, he said, awkward not only from the load. I do not, she said, but come back quickly. Do not worry when you hear the firing. There is bound to be much firing. Nay, only come back quickly. Goodbye, Guapa, he said awkwardly. Salud, Roberto. Robert Jordan had not felt this young since he had taken the train at Red Lodge to go down to Billings to get the train there to go away to school for the first time. He had been afraid to go, and he did not want anyone to know it, and at the station, just before the conductor picked up the box, he would step up on to reach the steps of the day coach. His father had kissed him goodbye and said, May the Lord watch between thee and me while we are absent the one from the other. His father had been a very religious man, and he had said it simply and sincerely, but his mustache had been moist, and his eyes were damp with emotion, and Robert Jordan had been so embarrassed by all of it. The damp, religious sound of the prayer and his father kissing him goodbye, that he had felt suddenly so much older than his father and sorry for him that he could hardly bear it. That he had suddenly felt so much older than his father and sorry for him that he could hardly bear it. After the train started, he had stood on the rear platform and watched the station and the water tower grow smaller and smaller, and the rails, crossed by the ties, narrowed toward the point where the station and the water tower stood now minute and tiny, and the steady, clicking chat was taking him away. The brakeman said, Dad seemed to take your going sort of hard, Bob. Yes, he said, watching the sagebrush that ran from the edge of the road bed between the passing telegraph poles across to the streaming by dusty stretching of the road. Streaming by dusty stretching of the road. He was looking for sage hens. You don't mind going away to school? No, he said, and it was true. It would not have been true before, but it was true that minute, and it was only now parting that he ever felt as young again as he had felt before that train left. He felt very young now and very awkward, and he was saying goodbye as awkwardly as one can be when saying goodbye to a young girl when you are a boy in school, saying goodbye at the front porch, not knowing whether to kiss the girl or not. Then he knew it was not the goodbye he was being awkward about. It was the meeting he was going to. The goodbye was only a part of the awkwardness he felt about the meeting. You're getting them again, he told himself. But I suppose there is no one that does not feel that he is too young to do it. He would not put a name to it. Come on, he said to himself. Come on. It is too early for your second childhood. Goodbye, Guapa, he said. Goodbye, Rabbit. Goodbye, my Roberto, she said, and he went over to where Anselmo and Augustine was standing and said, Vamonos. Anselmo swung his heavy pack up. Augustine, fully loaded since the cave, was leaning against a tree, the automatic rifle jutting over the top of his load. Good, he said. Vamonos. The three of them started down the hill. Buena suerte, Don Roberto, Fernando said, as the three of them passed him, as they moved. As they moved in single file between the trees. Fernando was crouched on his haunches a little way from where they passed, but he spoke with great dignity. Buena suerte thyself, Fernando, Robert Jordan said. In everything thou doest, Augustine said. Thank you, Don Roberto, Fernando said, undisturbed by Augustine. That one is a phenomenon, Ingles, Augustine whispered. I believe thee, Robert Jordan said. Can I help thee? Thou art loaded like a horse. I am all right, Augustine said. Man, but I am content we are started. Speak softly, Anselmo said. From now on, speak little and softly. Walking carefully downhill, Anselmo in the lead, Augustine next, Robert Jordan placing his feet carefully so that he would not slip, feeling the dead pine needles under his rope-soled shoes, bumping a tree root with one foot and putting a hand forward and feeling the cold metal jut of the automatic rifle barrel and the folded legs of the tripod, then working sideways down the hill, his shoes sliding and grooving the forest floor, putting his left hand out again and touching the rough bark of a tree trunk. Then as he braced himself, his hand feeling a smooth place, the base of the palm of his hand coming away sticky from the resinous sap where a blaze had been cut. They dropped down the steep wooded hillside to the point above the bridge where Robert Jordan and Anselmo had watched the first day. Now Anselmo was halted by a pine tree in the dark, and he took Robert Jordan's wrist and whispered, so low Jordan could hardly hear him. Look, there is the fire in his brazier. It was a point of light below where Robert Jordan knew the bridge joined the road. Here is where we watched, Anselmo said. He took Robert Jordan's hand and bent it down to touch a small fresh blaze low on a tree trunk. This I marked while thou watched. To the right is where thou wished to put the machina. We will place it there. Good. They put the packs down beside the base of the pine trees, and the two of them followed Anselmo over to the level place where there was a clump of seedling pines. It is here, Anselmo said. Just here. From here, with daylight, Robert Jordan, crouched behind the small trees, whispered to Augustine, "Thou wilt see a small stretch of road and the entrance to the bridge. Thou wilt see the length of the bridge and a small stretch of road at the other end, before it rounds the curve of the rocks." Augustine said nothing. "Here thou wilt lie while we prepare the exploding and fire on anything that comes from above or below." "Where is that light?" Augustine asked. "In the sentry box at this end," Robert Jordan whispered. "Who deals with the sentries?" "The old man and I, as I told thee. But if we do not deal with them, thou must fire into the sentry boxes and at them if thou seest them." "Yes, you told me that." "After the explosion, when the people of Pablo come around that corner, thou must fire over their heads if others come after them. Thou must fire high above them when they appear, in any event that others must not come. Understandest thou?" "Why not? It is as thou saidst last night." "Hast any questions?" "Nay, I have 2 sacks. I can load them from above, where it will not be seen, and bring them here. But do no digging here. Thou must be as well hid as we were at the top." "Nay, I will bring the dirt in them in the dark. You will see. They will not show as I will fix them." "Thou art very close." "Sabes?" "In the daylight this clump shows clearly from below." "Do not worry, Ingles. Where goest thou?" "I go close below with the small machina of mine. The old man will cross the gorge now to be ready for the box of the other end. It faces in that direction." "Then nothing more," said Augustine. "Salute, Ingles. Hast thou tobacco?" "Thou canst not smoke. It is too close." "Nay, just to hold in the mouth, to smoke later." Robert Jordan gave him his cigarette case, and Augustine took 3 cigarettes and put them inside the front flap of his herdsman's flat cap. He spread the legs of his tripod with the gun muzzle in the low pines and commenced unpacking his load by touch and laying the things where he wanted them. "Nada más," he said. "Well, nothing more." Anselmo and Robert Jordan left him there, and he went back to where the packs were. "Where had we best leave them?" Robert Jordan whispered. "I think here." "But canst thou be sure of the sentry with thy small machina from here?" "Is this exactly where we were on that day?" "The same tree," Anselmo said, so low Jordan could barely hear him, and he knew he was speaking without moving his lips as he had spoken that first day. "I marked it with my knife." Robert Jordan had the feeling again of it all having happened before, but this time it came from his own repetition of a query and Anselmo's answer. It had been the same with Augustine, who had asked a question about the centuries, although he knew the answer. It is close enough, even too close, he whispered. But the light is behind us. We are all right here. Then I will go now to cross the gorge and be in position at the other end. Anselmo said. Then he said, Pardon me, Ingles, so that there is no mistake, in case I am stupid. What? Breathed very softly. Typo? He breathed very softly. Only to repeat it so that I will do it exactly. When I fire, thou wilt fire. When thy man is eliminated, cross the bridge to me. I will have the packs down there, and thou wilt do as I tell thee in the placing of the charges. Everything I will tell thee. If aught happens to me, do it thyself as I showed thee. Take thy time and do it well, wedging all securely with the wooden wedges and lashing the grenades firmly. It is all clear to me, Anselmo said. I remember it all. Now I go. Keep thee well covered, Ingles, when daylight comes. When thou firest, Robert Jordan said, take a rest and make very sure. Do not think of it as a man, but as a target. De acuerdo? Do not shoot at the whole man, but at a point. Shoot for the exact center of the belly, if he faces thee, at the middle of the back, if he is looking away. Listen, old one. When I fire, if the man is sitting down, he will stand up before he runs or crouches. Shoot then. If he is still sitting down, shoot. Do not wait, but make sure. Get to within 50 yards. Thou art a hunter. Thou hast no problem. I will do as thou orderest, Anselmo said. Yes, I order it thus, Robert Jordan said. I'm glad I remembered to make it in order, he thought. That helps him out. That takes some of the curse off. I hope it does, anyway. Some of it. I had forgotten about what he told me that first day about the killing. It is thus I have ordered, he said. Now go. Me voy, said Anselmo. Until soon, Ingles. Until soon, old one, Robert Jordan said. He remembered his father in the railway station and the wetness of that farewell, and he did not say salute, nor goodbye, nor good luck, nor anything like that. Hast wiped the oil from the bore of thy gun, old one, he whispered, so it will not throw wild? In the cave, Anselmo said. I cleaned them all with the pull-through. Then until soon, Robert Jordan said, and the old man went off, noiseless on his rope-soled shoes, swinging wide through the trees. Robert Jordan lay on the pine needle floor of the forest and listened to the first stirring in the branches of the pines of the wind that would come with daylight. He took the clip out of the submachine gun and worked the lock back and forth. Then he turned the gun and the lock opened, and in the dark he put the muzzle to his lips and blew through the barrel, the metal tasting greasy and oily on his tongue, touched the edge of the bore. He laid the gun across his forearm, the action up so that no pine needles or rubbish could get in it. He shucked all the cartridges out of the clip with his thumb and onto a handkerchief he had spread in front of him. Then, feeling each cartridge in the dark and turning it in his fingers, he pressed and slid them one at a time back into the clip. Now the clip was heavy again in his hand, and he slid it back into the submachine gun and felt it click home. He lay on his belly behind the pine trunk, the gun across his left forearm, and watched the point of light below him. Sometimes he could not see it, and then he knew that the man in the sentry box had moved in front of the brazier. Robert Jordan lay there and waited for daylight. What's going to happen? Sounded to me like the guy that was delivering the message about El Sordo being destroyed, the goals, the guy he eventually talked to, sounded to me like they were going to call off the attack. Can you imagine? That's how the book ended. I don't think it would be such a famous book if that's how it ends. Chapter 42. During the time that Pablo had ridden back from the hills to the cave, and the time the band had dropped down to where they had left the horses, Andreas had made rapid progress toward Goals' headquarters, where they came onto the main high road to Navacerrada, on which the trucks were rolling back from the mountain. There was a control. But when Gomez showed the sentry at the control his safe conduct from the Lieutenant Colonel Miranda, the sentry put the light from a flashlight on it, showed it to the other sentry with him, then handed it back with a salute and saluted. "Siga," he said. "Continue, but without lights." The motorcycle roared again, and Andreas was holding tight onto the forward seat, and they were moving along the highway, Gomez riding carefully in the traffic. None of the trucks had lights, and they were moving down the road in a long convoy. There were loaded trucks moving up the road, too, and all of them raised a dust that Andreas could not see in the dark, but could only feel as a cloud that blew in his face and that he could bite between his teeth. They were close behind the tailboard of a truck now, the motorcycle chugging. Then Gomez speeded up and passed it, and another, and another, and another, with the trucks roaring and rolling down past them on the left. There was a motor car behind them now, and it blasted into the truck noise and the dust with its klaxon again and again, then flashed on lights and showed the dust like a solid yellow cloud and surged past them in a whining rise of gears and a demanding, threatening bludgeoning of klaxoning. Then ahead of all the trucks were stopped and riding on. Then ahead all the trucks were stopped and riding on, working his way ahead past ambulances, staff cars, an armored car, another and a third, all halted like heavy metal gun-jutting turtles. In the hot yet settled dust, they found another control where there had been a smash up. The truck, halting, had not been seen by the truck which followed. It and the following truck had run into it, smashing the rear of the first truck in and scattering cases of small armed ammunition over the road. One case had burst open on landing, and as Gomez and Andreas stopped and wheeled the motorcycle forward through the stalled vehicles to show their safe conduct at the control, Andreas walked over the brass hulls of the thousands of cartridges scattered across the road in the dust. The second truck and its radiator had its radiator completely smashed in. The truck behind it was touching its tailgate. 100 more were piling up behind, and an over-booted officer was running back along the road, shouting to the drivers to back so the smashed truck could be gotten off the road. There were too many trucks for them to be able to back unless the officer reached the end of the ever-mounting line and stopped it from increasing. And Andreas saw him running, stumbling, with his flashlight, shouting and cursing, and in the dark, the trucks kept coming up. The man at the control would not give the safe conduct back. There were two of them, with rifles slung on their backs and flashlights in their hands, and they were shouting too. The one carrying the safe conduct in his hand crossed the road to a truck going in the downhill direction to tell it to proceed to the next control and tell them there to hold all trucks until his jam was straightened out. The truck driver listened and went on. Then, still holding the safe conduct, the control patrol came over, shouting to the truck driver whose load was spilled. "Leave it and get ahead for the love of God so we can clear this," he shouted at the driver. "My transmission is smashed," the driver, who was bent over by the rear of his truck, said. "Obscene, your transmission. Go ahead, I say." "We do not go ahead. The differential is smashed," the driver told him and bent down again. "Get thyself pulled then. Get ahead, so that we can get this other obscenity off the road." The driver looked at him sullenly as the control man shone the electric torch on the smashed rear of the truck. Get ahead, the man shouted, still holding the safe conduct pass in his hand. "And my paper," Gomez spoke to him. "My safe conduct. We are in a hurry." "Take thy safe conduct to hell," the man said, and handing it to him, ran across the road to halt a down-coming truck. "Turn thyself at the crossroads, and put thyself in position to pull this wreck forward, he said to the driver. My orders are, obscenity thy orders, do as I say. The driver let his truck into gear and rolled straight ahead down the road and was gone in the dust. As Gomez started the motorcycle ahead onto the now clear right hand side of the road past the wrecked truck, Andres, holding tight again, saw the control guard halting another truck and the driver leaning from the cab and listening to him. Now they went fast, swooping along the road that mounted steadily toward the mountain. All forward traffic had been stalled at the control, and there were only the descending trucks passing on their left as the motorcycle climbed fast and steadily now until it began to overtake the mounting traffic, which had gone on ahead before the disaster at the control. Still without lights, they passed four more armored cars. Then a long line of trucks loaded with troops. The troops were silent in the dark, and at first, Andreas only felt their presence rising above him, bulking above the truck bodies through the dust as they passed. Then another staff came behind them, blasting with its klaxon and flicking its lights off and on, and each time the lights shone, Andreas saw the troops, steel-helmeted, their rifles vertical, their machine guns pointed up against the dark sky, etched sharp against the night that they dropped into when the light flicked off. Once as he passed close to a troop truck and the lights flashed, he saw their faces fixed and sad in the sudden light. In their steel helmets, riding in trucks in the dark toward something that they only knew was an attack. Their faces were drawn with each man's own problems in the dark, and the light revealed them as they would not have looked in the day, from shame to show it to each other, until the bombardment and the attack would commence, and no man would think about his face. Andreas, now passing them truck after truck, Gomez still keeping successfully ahead of the following staff car. He did not think any of this about their faces. He only thought, what an army, what equipment, what a mechanization. Vaya gente. Look at such people. Here we have the army of the Republic. Look at them. Camion after camion, all uniformed alike, all with casques of steel on their heads. Look at the machinas rising from the trucks against the coming of planes. Look at the army that has been builded. And as the motorcycle passed, the high gray trucks full of troops, great trucks with high square cabs and square ugly radiators, steadily mounting the road in the dust and the flicking lights of the pursuing staff car, the red star of the army showing in the light when it passed over the tailgates, showing when the light came onto the sides of the dusty truck bodies as they passed, climbing steadily now, the air colder and the road starting to turn in bends and switchbacks now. The trucks laboring and grinding, some steaming in the light flashes, the motorcycle laboring now too, and Andreas clinging tight to the front seat as they climbed. Andreas thought this ride on a motorcycle was mucho. He had never been on a motorcycle before, and now they were climbing a mountain in the midst of all the equipment, of all the movement that was going to an attack, and as they climbed, he knew now there was no problem of ever being back in time for the assault on the posts. In this movement and confusion, he would be lucky to get back by the next night. He had never seen an offensive or any of the preparations for one before, and as they rode up the road, he marveled at the size and power of his army that the Republic of this army that the Republic had built. Now they rode on a long, slanting, rising stretch of road that ran across the face of the mountain, and the grade was so steep as they neared the top that Gomez told him to get down, and together they pushed the motorcycle up the last steep grade of the pass. At the left, just past the top, there was a loop of road where cars could turn, and there were lights winking in front of a big stone building that bulked long and dark against the night sky. Let us go to ask there where the headquarters is, Gomez said to Andres, and they wheeled the motorcycle over to where two sentries stood in front of the closed door of the great stone building. Gomez leaned the motorcycle against the wall as a motorcyclist in a leather suit showing against the light from inside the building as the door opened, came out of the door with a dispatch case hung over his shoulder. A wooden holstered Mauser pistol swung against his hip. As the light went off, he found his motorcycle in the dark by the door, pushed it until it sputtered and caught, then rode off up the road. At the door, Gomez spoke to one of the sentries. Captain Gomez of the 65th Brigade, he said. Can you tell me where to find the headquarters of General Goals, commanding the 35th Division? It isn't here, the sentry said. What is here? The Commandancia. What Commandancia? Well, the Commandancia. Commandancia. The Commandancia of what? Who art thou to ask so many questions? The sentry said to Gomez in the dark. Here on the top of the pass, the sky was very clear, with the stars out, and Andreas, out of the dust now, could see quite clearly in the dark. Below them, where the road turned to the right, he could see clearly the outline of the trucks and cars that passed against the skyline. I am Captain Rogelio Gomez of the 1st Battalion of the 65th Brigade, and I ask, where is the headquarters of General Goals? Gomez said. The sentry opened the door a little way. Call the corporal of the guard, he shouted inside. Just then, a big staff car came up over the turn of the road and circled toward the big stone building where Andreas and Gomez were standing, waiting for the corporal of the guard. It came toward them and stopped outside the door. A large man, old and heavy, in an oversized khaki beret, such as chasseurs à pied wear in the French army, wearing an overcoat, carrying a map case, and wearing a pistol strapped around his greatcoat, got out of the back of the car with two other men in the uniform of the International Brigades. He spoke in French, which Andreas did not understand, and of which Gomez, who had been a barber, knew only a few words, to his chauffeur, telling him to get the car away from the door and into shelter. As he came into the door with the other two officers, Gomez saw his face clearly in the light and recognized him. He had seen him at political meetings, and he had often read articles by him in Mundo Obrero, translated from the French. He recognized his bushy eyebrows, his watery gray eyes, his chin and the double chin under it, and he knew him from one of France's great modern revolutionary figures. And he knew him for one of France's great modern revolutionary figures who had led the mutiny of the French Navy in the Black Sea. Gomez knew this man's high political place in the international brigades, and he knew this man would know where Goals' headquarters were and be able to direct him there. He did not know what this man had become with time. Disappointment, bitterness, both domestic and political, and thwarted ambition, and that to question him was one of the most dangerous things that any man could do. Knowing nothing of this, he stepped forward into the path of this man, saluted with his clenched fist, and said, "Comrade Marty, we are the bearers of a dispatch for General Goals. Can you direct us to his headquarters? It is urgent." The tall, heavy old man looked at Gomez with his outthrust head, and considered him carefully with his watery eyes. Even here, at the front, in the light of bare electric bulb, he having just come in from driving in an open car on a brisk night, his gray face had a look of decay. His face looked as though it were modeled from the waste material you find under the claws of a very old lion. "You have what, comrade?" he asked Gomez, speaking Spanish with a strong Catalan accent. His eyes glanced sideways at Andreas, slid over him, and went back to Gomez. "A dispatch for General Goals to be delivered at his headquarters, Comrade Marty." "Where is it from, comrade?" "From behind the fascist lines," Gomez said. Andre Marty extended his hand for the dispatch and the other papers. He glanced at them and put them in his pocket. "Arrest them both," he said to the corporal of the guard. "Have them searched and bring them to me when I send for them." With the dispatch in his pocket, he strode on into the interior of the big stone house. Outside in the guard room, Gomez and Andres were being searched by the guard. "What passes with that man?" Gomez said to one of the guards. "Este loco," the guard said. He is crazy." "No, he is a political figure of great importance," Gomez said. "He is the chief commissar of the international brigades." "A pesar de eso, este loco," the corporal of the guard said. "All the same, he's crazy. What do you behind the fascist lines?" "This comrade is a guerrilla from there," Gomez told him while the man searched him. "He brings a dispatch to General Goals." Guard well my papers. Be careful with that money and that bullet on the string. It is from my first wound at Guadarrama. Don't worry, the corporal said. Everything will be in this drawer. Why didn't you ask me where Goals was? We tried to, I asked the sentry, and he called you. But then came the crazy, and you asked him. No one should ask him anything. He is crazy. My Goals is up the road, 3 kilometers from here, and to the right, in the rocks of the forest. Can you not let us go to him now? Nay, it would be my head. I must take thee to the crazy. Besides, he has thy dispatch. Can you not tell someone? Yes, the corporal said. I will tell the first responsible one I see. All know that he is crazy. I had always taken him for a great figure, Gomez said, for one of the glories of France. He may be a glory in all, the corporal said, and put his hand on Andreas's shoulder, but he is crazy as a bedbug. He has a mania for shooting people. Truly? Shooting them? Como lo oyes, the corporal said. That old one kills more than the bubonic plague. Mata mas que la peste bubonica. But he doesn't kill fascists like we do. Que va? Not in joke. Mata bichos raros. He kills rare things. Trotskyites. Divagationers. Divagationers? And any type of rare beasts. Andreas did not understand any of this. When we were at Escorial, we shot I don't know how many for him, the corporal said. We always furnished the firing party. The men of the brigades would not shoot their own men, especially the French. To avoid difficulties, it is always us who do it. We shot French, we have shot Belgians, we have shot others of divers nationality, of all types. Tiene mania de fusilar gente. Always for political things. He's crazy. Purificia mas que el salvarsan. He purifies more than the Salversan. But you will tell someone of this dispatch. Yes, man, surely. I know every one of these 2 brigades. Every one comes through here. I know even up to and through the Russians, although only a few speak Spanish. We will keep this crazy from shooting Spaniards. But the dispatch too. Do not worry, comrade. We know how to deal with this crazy. He is only dangerous with his own people. We understand him now. Bring in the 2 prisoners, came the voice of Andre Marty. ¿Quieres echar un trago? Trago? The corporal asked. Do you want a drink? Why not? The corporal took a bottle of anise from a cupboard, and both Gomez and Andres drank. So did the corporal. He wiped his mouth on his hand. Vamonos, he said. They went out of the guard room with the swallowed burn of the anise warming their mouths, their bellies, and their hearts, and walked down the hall and entered the room where Marty sat behind a long table, his map spread in front of him, his red and blue pencil, with which he played at being a general officer, in his hand. To Andres, it was only one more thing. There had been many tonight. There were always many. If your papers were in order and your heart was good, you were in no danger. Eventually they turned you loose, and you were on your way. The Ingles had said to hurry, and he knew he could never get back for the bridge, but they had a dispatch to deliver, and this old man there at the table had put it in his pocket. Stand there, Marty said, without looking up. Listen, Comrade Marty, Gomez broke out, the unease fortifying his anger. Once tonight we have been impeded by the ignorance of the anarchists, then by the sloth of a bureaucratic fascist, now by the over-suspicion of a communist. Close your mouth, Marty said without looking up. This is not a meeting. Comrade Marty, this is a matter of utmost urgence, Gomez said, of the greatest importance. The corporal and the soldier with them were taking a lively interest in this, as though they were at a play. Then they had seen many times, but whose excellent moments they could always savor. Everything is of urgence, Marty said. All things are of importance. Now he looked up at them, holding the pencil. How did you know Goals was here? Do you understand how serious it is to come asking for an individual general before an attack? How could you know such a general would be here? Tell him to, Gomez said to Andreas. Comrade General, Andreas started. Andre Marty did not correct him in the mistake in rank. I was given that packet on the other side of the lines. On the other side of the lines, Marty said. Yes, I heard him say you came from the fascist lines. It was given to me, Comrade General, by an Inglese named Roberto, who had come to us as a dynamiter for this of the bridge. Understandeth? Continue thy story, Marty said to Andres, using the term story as you would say lie, falsehood, or fabrication. Well, Comrade General, the Inglese told me to bring it to the General Goals with all speed. He makes an attack in these hills now, on this day, and all we ask is to take it to him now, promptly, if it pleases the Comrade General. Marty shook his head again. He was looking at Andreas, but he was not seeing him. Goals, he thought, in a mixture of horror and exultation, as a man might feel hearing that a business enemy had been killed in a particularly nasty motor accident, or that someone you hated but whose probity you had never doubted had been guilty of defalcation. That Goals should be one of them, too. That Goals should be in such obvious communication with the fascists. Goals that he had known for nearly 20 years. Goals who had captured the gold train that winter with Lucas in Serbia. Goals who had fought against Kolchak and in Poland, in the Caucasus, in China, and here since the 1st October. But he had been close to Tukhachevsky, to Voroshilov, yes, too, but to Tukhachevsky, and to who else? Here, to Kharkov, of course, and to Lukacs. But all the Hungarians had been intriguers. He hated Gaul. Goals hated Gaul. Remember that? Make a note of that. Goals had always hated Gaul, but he favors Poots. Remember that. And Duval and his chief of staff. See what stems from that. You've heard him say Kopik's a fool. That is definitive. That exists. And now this dispatch from the fascist lines. Only by pruning over these rotten branches that can the tree remain healthy and grow. The rot must become apparent, for it is to be destroyed. But Goals of all men, that Goals should be one of the traitors. He knew that you could trust no one, ever, not your wife, not your brother, not your oldest comrade, no one, ever. Take them away, he said to the guards. Guard them carefully. The corporal looked at the soldier. This had been very quiet for one of Marty's performances. Comrade Marty, Gomez said, do not be insane. Listen to me, a loyal officer and comrade. That is a dispatch that must be delivered. This comrade has brought it through the fascist lines to give to Comrade General Goals. Take them away, Marty said, now kindly to the guard. He was sorry for them as human beings, if it should be necessary to liquidate them. But it was the tragedy of Goals that oppressed him, that it should be Goals, he thought. He would take the fascist communication at once to Varlov. No, better he would take it to Goals himself and watch him as he received it. That was what he would do. How could he be sure of Varlov if Goals was one of them? No, this was a thing to be very careful about. Andreas turned to Gomez. You mean he is not going to send the dispatch? He asked, unbelieving. But you see, Gomez said. Me cajo en su puta madre, Andreas said. Está loco. Yes, Gomez said. He is crazy. You are crazy here. Crazy. He shouted at Marty, who was back now, bending over the map with his red and blue pencil. Hear me, you crazy murderer. Take them away, Marty said to the guard. Their minds are unhinged by their great guilt. There was a phrase the corporal recognized. He had heard that before. You crazy murderer, Gomez shouted. Hijo de la gran puta, Andreas said to him. Loco. The stupidity of this man angered him. If he was crazy, let him be removed as a crazy. Let the dispatch be taken from his pocket. God damn this crazy to hell. His heavy Spanish anger was rising out of his usual calm and good temper. In a little while it would blind him. Marty, looking at his map, shook his head sadly as the guards took Gomez and Andres out. The guards had enjoyed hearing him cursed, but on the whole they had been disappointed in the performance. They had seen much better ones. Marty did not mind the men cursing him. So many men had cursed him at the end. He was always genuinely sorry for them as human beings. He always told himself that, and it was one of the last true ideas that was left to him that had ever been his own. He sat there, his mustache and his eyes focused on the map that he never truly understood, on the brown tracing of the contours that were traced fine and concentric as a spider's web. He could see the heights and the valleys from the contours, but he never really understood why it should be this height or why this valley was the one. But at the German staff, where, because of the system of political commissars, he could intervene as the political head of the brigades, he would put his finger on such and such a numbered, brown, thin-lined, encircled spot among the greens of woods cut by the lines of roads that parallel the never casual winding of a river and say, there, that is the point of weakness. Gall and Kopik, who were men of politics and of ambition, would agree, and later, men who never saw the map would hear the number of the hill before they left their starting place and have the earth of diggings on it pointed out, would climb its side to find their death along its slope, or being halted by machine guns placed in olive groves, but never get up it at all. Or on other fronts, they might scale it easily and be no better off than they had been before. But when Marty put his finger on the map in Goles's staff, the scar-headed, white-faced general's jaw muscles would tighten, and he would think, "I should shoot you, Andre Marty, before I let you put that gray, rotten finger on a contour map of mine. Damn you to hell for all the men you've killed by interfering in matters you know nothing of. Damn the day they named tractor factories and villages and cooperatives for you that are a symbol that I cannot touch. Go and suspect and extort. Go and suspect and exhort and intervene and denounce and butcher some other place and leave my staff alone." But instead of saying that, Goles would only lean back away from the leaning bulk, pushing finger, the watery gray eyes, the gray-white mustache, and the bad breath, and say, "Yes, Comrade Marty, I see your point. It is not well taken, however, and I do not agree. You can try to go over my head if you like, yes. You can make it a party matter, as you say, but I do not agree." So now Andre Marty sat working over his map at the bare table, with the raw light on the unshaded electric light bulb over his head, the overwide beret pulled forward to shade his eyes, referring to the mimeographed copy of the orders for the attack, and slowly and laboriously working them out of the map as a young officer might work a problem at a staff college. He was engaged in war. In his mind, he was commanding troops. He had the right to interfere, and this he believed to constitute command. So he sat there with Robert Jordan's dispatch to Goles in his pocket, and Gomez and Andreas waited in the guardroom, and Robert Jordan lay in the woods above the bridge. It is doubtful if the outcome of Andreas's mission would have been any different if he and Gomez had been allowed to proceed without Andre Marty's hindrance. There was no one at the front with sufficient authority to cancel the attack. The machinery had been in motion much too long for it to be stopped suddenly now. There is a great inertia about all military operations of any size. But once this inertia has been overcome and the movement is underway, they are almost as hard to arrest as to initiate. But on this night, the old man, his beret pulled forward, was still sitting at the table with his map when the door opened and Kharkov, the Russian journalist, came in with two other Russians in civilian clothes, leather coats, and caps. The corporal of the guard closed the door reluctantly behind them. Kharkov had been the first responsible man he had been able to communicate with. "Tovarich Marty," said Kharkov in his politely disdainful, lisping voice, and smiled, showing his bad teeth. Marty stood up. He did not like Kharkov, but Kharkov, coming from Pravda and in direct communication with Stalin, was at this moment one of the three most important men in Spain. "Tovarich Kharkov," he said. "You are preparing the attack," Kharkov said insolently, nodding toward the map. "I am studying it," Marty answered. "Are you attacking, or is it Goles?" Kharkov asked smoothly. "I am only a commissar, as you know," Marty told him. "No," Kharkov said. "You are modest. You are really a general. You have your map and your field glasses. But were you not an admiral once, Comrade Marty?" I was a gunner's mate, said Marty. It was a lie. He had really been a chief yeoman at the time of the mutiny, but he thought now, always, that he had been a gunner's mate. Ah, I thought you were a first-class yeoman, Kharkov said. I always get my facts wrong. It is the mark of the journalist. The other Russians had taken no part in the conversation. They were both looking over Marty's shoulder at the map and occasionally making a remark to each other in their own language. Marty and Kharkov spoke French after the first greeting. It is better not to get facts wrong in Pravda, Marty said. He said it brusquely to himself up again, to build himself up again. Kharkov always punctured him. The French word is dégonfler, and Marty was worried and made wary by him. It was hard, when Kharkov spoke, to remember with what importance he, André Marty, came from the Central Committee of the French Communist Party. It was hard to remember, too, that he was untouchable. Kharkov seemed always to touch him so lightly and whenever he wished. Now, Kharkov said, I usually correct them before I send them to Pravda. I am quite accurate in Pravda. Tell me, Comrade Marty, have you heard anything of any message coming through for goals from one of our partisan group operating towards Segovia? There is an American comrade there named Jordan that we should have heard from. There have been reports of fighting there behind the fascist lines. He would have sent a message through to Goals. An American, Marty asked. Andreas had said in Inglés. So that is what it was. So he had been mistaken. Why had those fools spoken to him anyway? Yes, Kharkov looked at him contemptuously. A young American of slight political development, but a great way with the Spaniards and a fine partisan record. Just give me the dispatch, Comrade Marty. It has been delayed enough. What dispatch? Marty asked. It was a very stupid thing to say, and he knew it. But he was not able to admit he was wrong that quickly, and he said it anyway to delay the moment of humiliation, not accepting any humiliation. And the safe conduct pass. And the safe conduct pass, Kharkov said through his bad teeth. André Marty put his hand in his pocket and laid the dispatch on the table. He looked Kharkov squarely in the eye. All right, he was wrong, and there was nothing he could do about it now, but he was not accepting any humiliation. And the safe conduct pass, Kharkov said softly. Marty laid it beside the dispatch. Comrade Corporal, Kharkov called in Spanish. The corporal opened the door and came in. He looked quickly at André Marty, who stared back at him like an old bear which had been brought to bay by hounds. There was no fear on Marty's face, and no humiliation. He was only angry, and he was only temporarily at bay. He knew these dogs could never hold him. Take these to the two comrades in the guard room and direct them to General Golds' headquarters, Kharkov said. There has been too much delay. The corporal went out, and Marty looked after him, then looked at Kharkov. Tovarich Marty, Kharkov said, I am going to find out just how untouchable you are. Marty looked straight at him and said nothing. Don't start to have any plans about the corporal either, Kharkov went on. It was not the corporal, I saw the two men in the guard room, and they spoke to me. This was a lie. I hope all men always will speak to me. This was the truth, although it was the corporal who had spoken. But Kharkov had this belief in the good, which could come from his own accessibility and the humanizing possibility of benevolent intervention. It was the only thing he was never cynical about. You know, when I am in the USSR, people write to me in Pravda when there is an injustice in a town in Azerbaijan. Did you know that? They say Kharkov will help us. Andrei Marty looked at him with no expression on his face except anger and dislike. There was nothing in his mind now but that Kharkov had done something against him. All right, Kharkov, power and all. All right. Kharkov, power and all, could watch out. This is something else, Kharkov went on. But it is the same principle. I am going to find out just how untouchable you are, Comrade Marty. I would like to know if it could not be possible to change the name of that tractor factory. Andrei Marty looked away from him and back to the map. What did young Jordan say? Kharkov asked him. I did not read it, Andrei Marty said. Et mantenet fiche moi la pai? Paix? Comrade Kharkov. Good, said Kharkov. I leave you to your military labors. He stepped out of the room and walked to the guard room. Andreas and Gomez were already gone, and he stood there a moment, looking up the road and at the mountain tops beyond, that showed now in the first gray of daylight. We must get on up there, he thought. It will be soon now. Andres and Gomez were on the motorcycle on the road again, and it was getting light. Now, Andreas holding again to the back of the seat ahead of him as the motorcycle climbed turn after switchback turn in a faint gray mist that lay over the top of the pass, felt the motorcycle speed under him, then skid and stop, and they were standing by the motorcycle on a long downslope of road, and in the woods on their left were tanks covered with pine branches. There were troops here all through the woods. Andreas saw men carrying the long poles of stretchers over their shoulders. 3 staff cars were off the road to the right and under the trees, with branches laid against their sides and other pine branches over their tops. Gomez wheeled the motorcycle up to one of them. He leaned it against a pine tree and spoke to the chauffeur, who was sitting by the car, his back against a tree. I'll take you to him, the chauffeur said. Put thy moto out of sight and cover it with these. He pointed to a pile of cut branches. With the sun just starting to come through the high branches of the pine trees, Gomez and Andres followed the chauffeur, whose name was Vicente, through the pines, across the road, and up the slope to the entrance of a dugout, from the roof of which signal wires ran up over the wooded slope. They stood outside, while the chauffeur went in, and Andreas admired the construction of the dugout, which showed only as a hole in the hillside, with no dirt scattered about, but which he could see from the entrance was both deep and profound, with men moving around in it freely, with no need to duck their heads under the heavy timbered roof. Vicente, the chauffeur, came out. He is up above where they are deploying for the attack, he said. I gave it to his chief of staff. He signed for it here. He handed Gomez the receipted envelope. Gomez gave it to Andreas, who looked at it and put it inside his shirt. What is the name of him who signed? He asked. Duval, Vicente said. Good, said Andres. He was one of the three to whom I might give it. Should we wait for an answer? Gomez asked Andres. It might be best, though where I will find the Inglés and the others after that of the bridge, neither God knows. Come, wait with me, Vicente said, until the general returns, and I will get thee coffee. Thou must be hungry. And these tanks, Gomez said to him. They were passing the branch-covered, mud-colored tanks, each with two deep-ridged tracks over the pine needles, showing where they had swung and backed from the road. Their 45mm guns jutted horizontally under the branches, and the drivers and gunners in their leather coats and ridged helmets sat with their backs against the trees or lay sleeping on the ground. These are the reserve, Vicente said. Also, these troops are in reserve. Those who commence the attack are above. They are many, Andres said. Yes, Vicente said. It is a full division. Inside the dugout, Duval, holding the opened dispatch from Robert Jordan in his left hand, glancing at his wristwatch on the same hand, reading the dispatch for the fourth time, each time feeling the sweat come out from under his armpit and run down his flank, said into the telephone, Get me position Segovia, then. He's left. Get me position Avila. He kept on with the phone. It wasn't any good. He had talked to both brigades. Goals had been up to inspect the dispositions for the attack, and was on his way to an observation post he called. The observation post, and was not there, and he was not there. He called the observation post, and he was not there. Get me planes 1, Duval said, suddenly taking all responsibility. He would take responsibility for holding it up. It was better to hold it up. He could not send them to a surprise attack against an enemy that was waiting for it. You couldn't do it. It was just murder. You couldn't. You mustn't. No matter what. They could shoot him if they wanted. He would call the airfield directly and get the bombardment canceled. But suppose it's just a holding attack. Suppose we were supposed to draw off all that material and those forces. Suppose that is what it is for. They never tell you it is a holding attack when you make it. Cancel the call to planes 1, he told the signaller. Get me the 69th Brigade observation post. He was still calling there when he heard the first sound of the planes. It was just then he got through to the observation post. Yes, Goals said quietly. Yes. He was sitting leaning back against the sandbag, his feet against a rock. A cigarette hung from his lower lip, and he was looking up and over his shoulder while he was talking. He was seeing the expanding wedges of threes, silver and thundering in the sky, that were coming over the far shoulder of the mountain, where the first sun was striking. He watched them come shining and beautiful in the sun. He saw the twin circles of light where the sun shone on the propellers as they came. Yes, she said into the telephone, speaking in French because it was Duval on the wire. Nous sommes fautas. Oui. Mais toujours. Oui. C'est dommage. Oui. It's a shame it came too late. His eyes, watching the planes coming, were very proud. He saw the red wing markings now, and he watched their steady, stately, roaring advance. This was how it could be. These were our planes. They had come, crated on ships from the Black Sea through the Straits of Marmora, through the Dardanelles, through the Mediterranean, and to here, unloaded lovingly at Alicante, assembled ably, tested and found perfect, and now flown in lovely hammering precision. The V's, tight and pure as they came, now high and silver in the morning sun, to blast those ridges across there and blow them roaring high so that we can go through. Goals knew that once they had passed overhead and on, the bombs would fall, looking like porpoises in the air as they tumbled. And then the ridge tops would spout and roar in jumping clouds and disappear in one great glowing cloud. Then the tanks would grind, clinking up those two slopes, and after them would go his two brigades. And if it had been a surprise, they could go on and down and over and through, pausing, cleaning up, dealing with much to do, much to be done, intelligently with the tanks helping. With the tanks wheeling and returning, giving covering fire, and others bringing the attackers up, then slipping on and over and through and pushing down beyond. This was how it would be if there was no treason, and if all did what they should. There were the two ridges, and there were the tanks ahead, and there were his two good brigades ready to leave the woods, and here came the planes now. Everything he had to do had been done as it should be. But as he watched the planes almost up to him now, he felt sick at his stomach, for he knew from having heard Jordan's dispatch over the phone that there would be no one of those two ridges. They'd be withdrawn a little way below in narrow trenches to escape the fragments, or hiding in the timber, and when the bombers passed, they'd get back up with their machine guns and their automatic weapons, and the anti-tank guns, Jordan had said, went up the road, and it would be one famous balls up more. But the planes would be one famous and it would be one famous balls up more. But the planes now coming deafeningly were how it could have been, and Goals watching them, looking up, said into the telephone, No, rien à faire, rien. Faut pas penser, faut accepter. Bowles watched the planes with his hard, proud eyes and knew how things could be and how they would be instead, and said, proud of how and said, proud of how they could be, believing in how they could be, even if they never were. Bon nos feros notre petit possible, and hung up. Bon nos ferons notre petit possible, possible, and hung up. But Duval did not hear him. Sitting at the table, holding the receiver, all he heard was the roar of the planes, and he thought, now, maybe this time, listen to them come. Maybe the bombers will blow them all off. Maybe we will get a breakthrough. Maybe he will get the reserves he asked for. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the time. Go on. Come on. Go on. The roar was such that he could not hear what he was thinking. Chapter 43.